Hi, this is Eddie Hearn, and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, and this is the Lights Out Boxing Podcast, Podcast 31. Pleasure as always to be joined by the usual faces, Mohsin Gulshir, aka Ron, Asif Khan, and from the Good Boxing Podcast, Josh Sayers. My fellow boxing brothers, how's it going?
It's going pretty well, man. Thanks
for
having
mate.
me. Good. Got a lot to talk about today. Before we get started, just wanted to remind the viewers out there, if they haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. And don't forget to check out the Good Boxing Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and their social media platforms as well. We will share the links in the description. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot to talk about. We'll start with last night's action at the Copper Box Arena in London. Conor Benn stopped Samuel Vargas in round 1. Before we go deep into it, let's just remember one thing. Samuel Vargas took Amir Khan 12 rounds. He also gave a good account against the likes of Errol Spence. But Conor Benn, the so-called next big thing, stopped him in round 1 last night. So let's dive into it. Lads, what was your thoughts on Conor Benn last night?
Yeah, I mean, what can you really learn from, was it 2 minutes? I think he said after it, didn't he, that, you learn from the time you spend in the ring, and that wasn't a long time. Listen, I think we all know what Conor Benn's about. He's an explosive fighter. He's improved massively, from when he first started out, even not from when he first started out, probably his first maybe 7, 8, 9 fights. He was wild, he was reckless, but he's come on leaps and bounds now. And it was a shame that he couldn't showcase that maybe a bit longer than the 2 minutes. But you can see the improvement, and now I think it's just about managing him to that next level now.
Eddie Hearn said that he is the future Sky Sports box office superstar. He's definitely going to be the guy that sells out arenas, the guy that sells out Sky box office. I, for one, think Eddie Hearn has got a point, but I also do think there are bigger and better tests out there waiting for him. And when you talk about the bigger and better tests, Conor Benn did call out the likes of Amir Khan, Adrian Broner, and Sean Porter after the fight. I just want to read a quote that Johnny Nelson said after the fight, that he said, Amir Khan will not fight Conor Benn after what he's just done to Vargas. Benn will beat the likes of Broner and Sean Porter. Now, in boxing, I always believe there's 3 stages. Obviously, British, European, and world level. That's obviously if you're a British fighter. Do we honestly believe that Conor Benn can challenge the likes of Sean Porter, Adrian Broner, and Amir Khan right now? Or do we think he's still got a lot of learning to do?
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah, go for it, Josh.
Truthfully, Adrian Broner, I think he's ready for Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner looked very rusty. He looked like, if honestly, at 147, he's not the biggest 147-pounder. And Conor Benn is very, very explosive. I thought Samuel Vargas was going to actually give him a test, and he straight up sparked him in 1 round. Say what you want, but people were trying to take his head off. You had Amir Khan try to kill him. You had Errol Spence fight him, and he couldn't even get him out that fast. Even Virgil Ortiz couldn't get him out. So I think Conor Benn is actually really the goods. He made me eat my words, and I think he's a world-class fighter, honestly, after yesterday. I mean, Samuel Vargas did get caught cold. Maybe he didn't get into the fight fast enough. Maybe he got caught with something he didn't expect. And then the referee, with the avalanche of punches that came, stopped the fight. But I think he beats Broner right now. That Broner that just fought recently against I don't want to say a mediocre fighter, because the guy that he fought was undefeated, had never lost before. But he was really a nobody. I think Conor Benn will spark Adrian Broner right now. It'll be a good fight for him. But in terms of Amir Khan, I'm so annoyed by Amir Khan. Guy talks so much trash, and he just I just can't stand the guy right now. Honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you.
The Amir Khan fight, the potential Ben Khan fight is getting a lot of publicity right now. And Amir Khan took to Twitter last night and he tweeted, "Conor, well done. Wish him the best. But at his age, I was world champion. maybe if he had some belts, that fight would make sense, but he's got a long way to go yet. Now, when you talk about Amir Khan, the Olympics, the world title wins, those big nights he's given to British boxing, but then obviously you look at some of the things he's done in his career that a lot of people didn't agree with, such as stepping up to fight Canelo. There's been lots of trainers, the whole Kell Brook saga, but you can't knock what Amir Khan's done in boxing. He's made a lot of money. He's had a very lucrative career. Ron, does that fight make sense for Amir Khan right now, judging on what you've seen so far in Conor Benn's career?
In a simple answer, no. What does Amir Khan gain from beating Conor Benn, an up-and-coming prospect who's hungrier? Amir Khan is just in it for the money, really. He's looking for the one last payday. Sadly, I'm one of those ones that did watch a bit of the reality TV show that he's on. And, he does mention boxing, but his life is not really about boxing anymore. It's other interests outside of sport. He didn't look in great shape, but I think he's trying to chalk up that Kell Brook fight. They're at different stages of their careers. Amir Khan's on one last swan song. And Conor Benn, like he said, when he beats an opponent, he takes his experience. So he's desperate for that names on his CV that he's kind of got. Vargas is a good name to have for someone who's 17, 18, had hardly an amateur background. So people have been giving Conor Benn a hard time because of his dad and his limited amateur experience. But he's got bad intentions in both those hands. That's something that's like you said, give respect to my name, and I totally agree with that. After that fight, he made a statement. But if I was Amir Khan, wouldn't be taking any of that heat. Because it's just not worth it at this point in your career. Have that fight with Kell Brook and then say goodbye to boxing.
You see, the thing is with me, when I look at Amir Khan's current situation in boxing, regardless of what's happened in his career the last 4 or 5 years, the previous fight with Terrence Crawford, for the first time in his career, which he got outboxed against Terrence Crawford. Amir Khan...
And he quit.
Well, yeah, he
quit. 100% quit that fight. Sorry to interrupt. You gotta call a spade a spade. The guy quit in that fight.
We got to remember what, for me,
he looked disinterested. Yeah, agreed.
For me personally, he's still a big name in boxing, regardless of whether he's been active or inactive. I think he's still a big name, and I still think the likes of Pacquiao would probably even entertain a fight with Amir Khan because he's just got that big name. Manny Pacquiao's not getting any younger. His career is sort of, there's question marks around it, what his next move is. We'll come to that in a bit. But Asif, the name itself, Amir Khan, can it still attract the likes of the Pacquiaos, or do you think maybe a Conor Benn or that fight with Kell Brook is possibly his last dance in boxing?
I think the Conor Benn fight 100% doesn't make sense because risk to reward. I don't think he'll get paid silly amount of money because I don't think Conor Benn he's not a pay-per-view star yet. So I don't think he'll make a massive amount of money. And then again, the risk to reward, if he wins, you beat a 24-year-old up-and-coming prospect. If you lose, that's it, game over. But Amir Khan is kind of like I'm trying to think of the word, but he's the only British fighter I know that before he even conquered Britain, he went to America and made a bigger name for himself there. So in my eyes, Conor Benn should be looking to try and do something like that. Because they're talking about, taking a gamble with him. Eddie Hearn said after the fight, we need to take a gamble. Do they? He's only 24 years old. Why rush him? Because the step up to the elite level in that division is ridiculous. I was looking at the top 10, just the top 10, across all the bodies, and the list is stupid. Avanesian, great name. I think he's in the top 10 of all the governing bodies. He's European champion, makes perfect sense. Just build him up slowly. There's no reason to take them Sean Porters or the Adrian Broners. He probably might be him, but why take the risk? Because he's one loss away from then going down 3 or 4 steps, and that's not what you want to see.
Josh, you obviously day in day out are uploading podcasts, and you obviously have a lot to say about the 147 division. Now, the way I see it, you've got 3 fighters in that division that just rule the roost: Pacquiao, Spence, and Crawford. Then there's fighters such as Mikey Garcia, Keith Thurman, Ugas, Sean Porter. Is there anyone else?
Ortiz.
Garcia as well.
Is there anyone else? Do you look at Conor Benn and think he's got the potential to make that step up right now and challenge someone like a Sean Porter or an Adrian Broner right now?
I mean, truthfully, look how Kell Brook's name got, I guess, like put up on a pedestal. Who did he beat? He beat Sean Porter. I do think Sean Porter, while he is a good fighter, he has been in there and given people a test. That fight with Errol Spence, I feel like Errol decided to not box as much as he should have, and he wanted to fight in a dog fight with Sean Porter. But I don't really think Sean Porter is heads and heels above Conor Benn in terms of pure ability. In terms of his experience, sure. But what gives Sean Porter trouble? Someone who's not going to get out-muscled. And Conor Benn is pretty strong. I mean, he's not like a noodle. He's pretty solid. He has good fundamental boxing. And sure, Sean Porter could pressure him. But when you have power, someone that's trying to crowd you and come towards you, I think you could catch Sean Porter over the top of one of those looping right hands. You never know. The Keith Thurmans of the world, I don't know. That's a little too early, in my opinion. But if you look at the lower echelon of 147, I wouldn't fight Jaron and his boots. They're both kind of new. So I guess that's not a good fight. But in terms of Danny Garcia, that might be a tall test as well. So I think that David Evanieson fight is very, very lucrative, in my opinion. You kind of go to the top of, I guess, your country, the European title, and show that you're the best in your continent. And then you kind of migrate over. I wouldn't fight Kell Brook. I feel like Kell Brook, in my opinion, is a little physically challenging for Conor Benn. The Amir Khan fight, I know you guys are saying it's really low risk, high low reward for Amir Khan. But if Amir Khan truthfully wants a fight that people, I guess, will pay for, like a Pacquiao, one of those really, really lucrative fights, if you beat an up-and-coming prospect, you solidify yourself as a current fighter. You make it seem like, hey, I'm still out here beating young champs, young hungry lions, similar to what Mayweather was trying to do when he fought Ortiz. Did he have to fight Victor Ortiz? No, but he did. And he wanted to fight a young, strong champion just to be like, hey, I'm out here fighting hungry lions. If he loses, it's game over. But regardless, Kell Brook, Amir Khan, that's the fight everyone wants to see. I know you're convinced it's not going to happen, but that's probably the only fight he has. Because the Pacquiao fight, no one's paying to see Pacquiao, Amir Khan. I'm sorry. I wouldn't. I don't think right now. I don't think Pacquiao's going to fight Amir Khan.
Well, listen, anything can happen in this sport of boxing. When you talk about Conor Benn, before we move on to the next topic, British-wise, you've still got Mikey Mickinson, who put in a great performance against Chris Congo on the White Povetkin undercard. I think that's a good fight. Chris Jenkins is the current British champion. Why not win the British outright, then move on to the likes of and push up to European level? Florian Marcoux, why not? There's still good fights to be made at British level, but Eddie Hearn is the man with a plan. Only time will tell. Let's move on. Let's talk about another fight on that card that took place last night. Shannon Courtenay versus Ebanie Bridges. Shannon Courtenay became the WBA bantamweight champion. I enjoyed the fight. It got a lot of publicity leading up to the fight, and it probably got more publicity than the main event, maybe for not all the right reasons. But in the end, a very, very good fight, and credit to Shannon Courtenay. Bounced back from that defeat against Rachel Ball and is now the WBA bantamweight champion. Lads, women's boxing in the last 5 years, what do you think of it, and how impressed have you been with how women's boxing has sort of been on the rise as of late?
I mean, from a British perspective, women's got, Katie Taylor's been leading the way, with her success in the Olympics and, and the world level, what she's achieved there at the lightweight division. Across the Atlantic, you've got Clarissa Shields, who's got claims to be the GOAT, as you want to call it. And it's really picking up in popularity now. And I love the kind of the face-off between Ebanie Bridges and Shannon Courtenay. I think it got a lot more some more tension than the actual main event. People kind of forgot that was the main event. So it was a good fight. It was a good tear-up. I think it was I love the build-up to it. And, I love the psychological warfare between the two fighters. But I think Shannon Courtenay, she was destined to be a world champion after that defeat against, that last defeat she had.
Yeah.
But it was a very good fight, and obviously you mentioned Katie Taylor. Don't forget you've also got Savannah Marshall as well, who's a British.
Absolutely, yeah. I forgot about
who put in a good performance last night. And someone said on our WhatsApp group, you can tell she's definitely a Peter Fury fighter. But Asif, what did you learn about Shannon Courtenay last night, and just how far do you expect her to go in the rest of her career now that she secured her first world title?
I think first of all, she'd probably want to avenge the loss to Rachel Ball. So I think that's probably the next best step to her. But it was a good fight. It was a really good fight. And I want to see I'd like to see the rematch if I'm being honest. The thing is with women's boxing, right, is unless you're into boxing, you don't really know too many other names other than the top contenders. And I think that's where the push needs to be with the women's boxing, because I'll be honest with you, I don't really follow women's boxing too much unless it's right in front of me. The Clarence Shields and that, Josh will probably tell me she's a massive name over in America, but I knew about her, but it's only until I started looking into her record, I thought, wow, look at that. Olympic gold medalist, unified champion in how many different weight classes. So I know what you said about in the last 5 years, it's come on leaps and bounds, but I still think there needs to be there's not that much of a depth of fighters, if you know what I mean. If you look at all these top fighters, they're I think the Clarence Shields, she fought maybe 11, 12 pro fights. Am I right or wrong? Is it not a massive list to not massive numbers to be that that big of a champion? So yeah.
Josh, I remember one of your podcasts that I really enjoyed was your take on women's boxing. Now, I know you had a few things to say. I'm not going to repeat what you said, but again, your opinion, you're entitled to it. But when you look at British women's boxing, what's your take on it?
When you look at British women's boxing, and this is one thing I have to give Eddie Hearn credit for, I feel like he's doing a phenomenal job in promoting his women's fighters. I feel like he really does put the time and effort into developing them. When you look at Katie Taylor, she constantly is paid well. So you can tell that she puts the majority of her time into her craft, getting good sparring, and you see the quality of her boxing. My main issue with women's boxing, and as you know with my pod, the reason why I said I kind of hated it was that it kind of looks like a different sport. It's different time. 10 rounds for a championship fight. And I feel like we should give more respect to the woman and just make it uniform so people won't look at it like women's boxing and they'll just look at it like boxing, because everything's affected. When you have 2 minutes versus 3 minutes, you're losing 33% of a round. You can't really develop a game plan, and you can't look polished the way you could if you had a little more time and a little more patience. However, I do feel the Katie Taylors of the world, the Savannah Marshalls of the world, that was a fantastic performance yesterday. And these two women yesterday that fought, Bridges and Courtenay, it was a really, really good fight. There wasn't the condescending commentary sometimes like, oh, these girls really go at it. It was a fight. You saw the girl's eye. You saw that they were in the trenches. Bridges came to win. Sure, Courtenay and a lot of people weren't very happy with what she wore to the weigh-in, right? The lingerie, the whole thing that people were really upset about, right? But at the end of the day, the fight was good. I thought it was a good, high-quality fight. And it delivered. And that's what I love about Matchroom and Eddie Hearn. I feel like in America, they're not really promoting women's boxing the right way. Clarissa Shields even went on the Joe Rogan podcast and said she had to go to MMA in order to make her bills. And you're talking about potentially the poster girl or the poster woman of women's boxing in America. And you have to go to MMA like that. That's just a head scratcher to me.
Last fight I really enjoyed, and Savannah Marshall is a fighter.
She's good.
Her and style, she's got that Fury-like style, hasn't she? I mean, I was watching her, studying her, kind of with the shoulder drops and the jabbing and the power she's got.
Yeah, she's good.
But that power is relentless. I think I'd love to. That's a matchup we've got to see. That's a fight I would definitely could see selling out. Savannah Marshall and Clarissa Shields. be it. What'd you make of that one, Josh? Don't know if you're.
I mean, truthfully, I know Savannah Marshall beat Clarissa Shields in the amateurs, but that was a long time ago. Right now, I do. It's honestly a toss-up fight. That jab that Savannah Marshall has is very educated, and I could see her baiting Clarissa Shields out when she tries to move her head. And jabs, when it's a 2-minute round for 10 rounds, I could see Savannah Marshall giving Clarissa Shields some issues. She's not going to be able to get inside, and she could potentially upset her. But I have to look at the fight and see someone else who had a good jab and see how Clarissa Shields deals with it, because based on what I saw yesterday, I kind of like Savannah Marshall in the fight, honestly.
Well, I'm sure Fast Car Eddie Hearn has got a plan, because he is the man with a plan. And that's a fight I'd love to see as well. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing Terence.
The number one promoter in the game right now, honestly, soon.
Let's move on to the next topic. The topic that's still making a lot of noise. We still yet to have a confirmed date and venue, but we're now told that there's 6 possibilities for locations for Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. Tyson Fury released on his social media that the 6 possible locations are Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Uzbekistan, Russia, England, and the United States of America. Looking at those 6 locations, Ching, Saudi Arabia for me. I think it's pretty inevitable that the fight will go to Saudi Arabia because of the pandemic situation. I can't see the fight coming to England or even America. Uzbekistan and Russia, I wouldn't want to see it go there. Qatar, maybe it could be like their rodeo to show us what's in store for the World Cup in 2022. But Saudi Arabia does look like the number 1 choice so far. Guys, where's this fight going? Where do you want to see it going? And do you truly believe now that the fight is actually happening?
Yeah, probably what you said. So, listen, whatever pays the most money is where it's going to go. This hasn't got nothing to do with how many fans are going to be in the stadium. This has all got to do with which venue is going to put up the most money. That's all it's got to do with. So, listen, we just want to see the fight. It is dragging on a bit now, and you know what? I do feel sorry for Eddie Hearn, because it looks like he's the only one trying to make this fight happen. And everyone's like, oh, it's not happening, or you get Bob Arum or Frank Warren saying, oh, it's not going to happen. The time's running out. He's the only one that seems to be pushing for this fight, and it's probably the most positive thing from the Fury side was what he released, yesterday. His video saying, oh, venues have been put forward to him, and so it looks like we're nearly there. It just looks like, and you asked the question of where it will happen. Whoever's paying the most money will happen. If they put it on a boat in the middle of the ocean and it's paying the most money, it will happen.
I looked at some of the choices, and Uzbekistan, Russia. I know Kovalev over in Russia, has a big following, but I remember watching the Yard Kovalev fight based in Russia, Shabaletsk, I believe it's pronounced. I didn't like how they put on their shows. Uzbekistan is for me is the most less appealing of the 6 choices. But I do believe Saudi Arabia. I would have loved to have seen it go to Qatar, because on one of our previous podcasts, someone mentioned that it could be like a little warm-up for what's in store for the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup that is in 2022. But Josh, Ron, Saudi Arabia, do you guys believe that's where it's going?
Well, they've done it before, haven't they? They did the Joshua rematch. And they did a good job of it. It was a success. Eddie Hearn knows what he's working with. Saudi Arabia has held other sporting events as well. I'm sure the WWE's been. I think was it the Royal Rumble maybe. Yep, so they're pushing. They're pushing their weight, and that's part of their political kind of to attract different type of tourism to Saudi Arabia. Qatar, we mentioned about that. That would be another potential location. England, it seems to be really unpredictable what's happening in the country again. I wouldn't be surprised if we're down in another lockdown by then. When they agree to fight, I think it's August. Is that the dates where we're hearing?
July, August, somewhere around that.
July, August. So let's see where we're at. But I can't see it being in this country. It's a toss up between Saudi Arabia and Qatar for me.
Josh, when you look at this current situation, that it's being regarded as the biggest fight of for me, I've got it as the biggest fight of our generation. It's the fight that holds all the marbles. It's the one fight we've been calling for since Tyson Fury, destroyed Deontay Wilder. When you look at what's going on in the world, do you honestly believe that the fight does go to Saudi Arabia? And are you now 100% confident that this fight is happening?
I had spoken to you before and mentioned that I love how everything is, we're super duper close today. We're even getting closer. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. It's always getting closer. I'm just really going to wait till May when the Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury hearing is done, because anything that's negotiated now, Deontay Wilder and his camp, when they go to court and they have to do that whole thing, are going to say that they're not trying to operate in good faith. And it's going to be a detriment to Tyson Fury in that case. So I think the announcement's going to be made probably after that, or I could be wrong. But in terms of like the venue, I think Saudi Arabia does make sense, but I still think the fight deserves to be in England or America, honestly, because I mentioned before, America's open. You go to Texas, Canelo's going to have a full capacity stadium with 80,000 people ready to go. If you need people, Tyson Fury, again, ESPN, they're going to try to promote it here. It's one of the biggest markets. The Saudi Arabia fight, I don't know if that Ruiz and Anthony Joshua fight did as well as it could have in terms of views. It did well. Would it do as well as, say, Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua prime time in America or England? I don't know. But in terms of money, yeah, I guess Saudi Arabia makes sense. But I'm confident the fight's going to be made for sure.
Because of what's happened in the past with the heavyweight division, I'll believe it until I see the first bell. I mean, until I see them in the ring and we hear the sound of the first bell, anything can happen. As you mentioned, the whole Deontay Wilder thing in court. And then obviously, look, we know there's a lot of, animosity between Tyson Fury, his old man, Frank Warren, and Eddie Hearn. They've never always had the greatest of relationships. Anything can happen. They might, just the smallest of things in the contract could be easily for one of them to turn around and say, no, fight's off, not happening. It's not like the olden days where Ali, Frazier, and these lot would just get it on and there'd be no hiccups or no issues leading up to the fight. But because of how things are now, because of the amount of money that's pumped into the sport, you can't rule nothing out. But in all honesty, I do think if the fight happens, because like I said, anything can happen from now to fight night, for me, I think it is going to Saudi Arabia. I think there could potentially already be a deal done with the Saudis. And as Ron mentioned, Saudi Arabia have done well with WWE. America Texas will host Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders. Tampa Bay, Florida this weekend have allowed fans back into the WWE for WrestleMania. So there are possibilities. I don't believe the fight is going to go to England because, again, there's only one place it goes to in England. That's Wembley Stadium, and that's obviously if it's a full capacity. But fingers crossed the fight does get announced sooner rather than later because it is a situation dragging out. Just a few more topics to discuss before we bring the podcast to an end. Rumors are that Terrence Crawford will take on Manny Pacquiao. Fight could take place in May or June. As if we've all called for Crawford versus Spence, but let's not forget Manny Pacquiao is a current WBA welterweight champion of the world. He is the 8-weight division world champion. Crawford Pacquiao, do you like it? Would you stay up late for it UK time? And is it a fight that you want to see?
Want to see? Probably not. But if it's there, I'll see it. I mean, it's not one I'd call for, but if it was available, then yeah. Listen, Manny Pacquiao is going to draw the viewers in because he's just an exciting fighter. His past and what he's about. Great fighter, and he still seems to be at that level. And obviously, Crawford is the next big thing. So it might be like a passing the torch kind of fight where he hands it over to Crawford to run away with it. But yeah, I would see it. Listen, Pac-Man's always going to be one of the greatest fighters of our generation, and he'd always get us watching.
Ron, you were nodding your head there. Why?
I was in disagreement. I would love to see that fight. I mean, Pacquiao's still got it, man. He's an old dog, but he's still he's a WBA kind of title holder and can't rule him out. And against Terrence Crawford, who's been in the recent times been getting some more notable names on his record. I mean, look, as Brits, he's had Amir Khan and Kell Brook, who he's defeated and knocked out, and made them quit or whatever you want to call it. I'd love that fight. As a boxing fan, I'd love to see those two in the ring. As what Asif says, is it a passing of the torch? I wouldn't rule Pacquiao out. I don't know.
Josh, when I spoke to you a couple of days ago on social media, you told me that even till this day, you were still impressed with how Manny Pacquiao handled Keith Thurman. But that fight was in 2019. He's not fought six. Does Pacquiao still put that same type of performance in against Terrence Crawford? Or do you agree with Asif's comments that this is a passing of the torch and this could be the final dance, the last dance for Manny Pacquiao?
Well, here's my take. I feel like Manny Pacquiao has been in the ring with a Terence Crawford before. He's faced the caliber of fighter like Terence Crawford. Crawford is not something he hasn't been in the ring with, right, in terms of boxing ability. But Crawford is yet to fight anyone like Manny Pacquiao. And a lot of people find out when they're in the ring with Manny Pacquiao that it's different when you're fighting the 8-time division champion. Am I going to sit here and say Manny Pacquiao is a foregone favorite? No, you have to give the favorite to the younger, fresher Terence Crawford, who is a very good, formidable boxer. I'm not going to sit here and take that away from him. But I think this fight 100% needs to happen. One, we got to find out what Terence Crawford is, right? We truthfully get a true test at 147. And I know you're big on Pacquiao and you want to put respect on his name. And I think this is that fight that if Pacquiao were to win, changes boxing at 147 completely. Because all of a sudden Pacquiao beats Terence Crawford. What happens? The floodgates open. You got Terence Crawford you got Spence versus Pacquiao. You got a bunch of different fights that can be made. So I feel like Pacquiao is a good measuring stick for both Crawford, right? Gives Crawford what he wants. He wants money, clearly, because he's unhappy with Bob Arum. And Bob Arum is going to let Pacquiao make the money he deserves as well. So I think it's a good fight, and it's a good measuring stick for both guys. Does Pacquiao still have it? And is Crawford the goods? Because at the end of the day, we keep hearing Terence Crawford's pound for pound, and I agree based on his accomplishments at 140. But at 147, it's been how many years? And he hasn't fought anyone but, no disrespect to Kell Brook and Amir Khan, but they weren't the same Amir Khan that fought Danny Garcia or the same Kell Brook that fought Sean Porter. You fought a guy that was later in his career after a couple of losses. So I want to see Pacquiao fight Terence Crawford. I think that's a good fight for both guys at this point in their career.
Before we bring the podcast to an end, let's get a prediction if that fight does happen, because I do think that fight happens next, given the whole situation with Errol Spence over at the PBC. I don't see the Spence and Crawford fight happening anytime soon. So, lads, if it does happen, Crawford versus Pacquiao, predictions. Asif.
I see the 42, nearly 43-year-old getting stopped probably, and that'll be the end of a great career. And that's probably one of the main reasons why I wouldn't want to see it, is because when you hold fighters up that high and you've grown up watching them over years and years being at the top of the sport, I wouldn't want to see him battle like that. But yeah, Crawford, I'd see him probably stopping Pacquiao.
Ron, what happens if Bud gets in the ring with Pac-Man?
I give it to Crawford on points.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, Terence Crawford, I feel, is going to win, but I truthfully do think Manny Pacquiao does possess the toolkit to give trouble to Crawford. My main issue with Crawford is he likes to engage a lot and gets aggressive, and against Manny Pacquiao, that's just a horrible strategy. And he's tricky, he's crafty. But Crawford, I feel like he'll adjust and then eventually figure the Pac-Man riddle out. So I have Crawford by points too.
I've said it for many, many years, and I'll constantly continue saying it. Pacquiao gets better with age. For me, one of his best performances in his career was against Keith Thurman, and I believe he beat Terence Crawford because he's just Manny Pacquiao, and he's one of the greats. And don't rule out Manny Pacquiao. The amount of experience he's got, 8 weight division world champion, and Crawford's not fought an elite fighter at 147, regardless of what your opinions are. on him fighting the likes of Kell Brook and Amir Khan. That's all we've got time for on podcast 31 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. Ron, Asif, Josh, a pleasure as always. And to those who haven't already, hit that subscribe button, visit us on our social media platforms, check out the Good Boxing Podcast on their social media platforms, and thank you for listening to podcast 31 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast.
Awesome, guys. Thank you.